Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading. This is John Krakauer's Under the Banner of Heaven, a story of violent faith. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into part one. The schisms that shattered Mormonism time and again, more critical than inroads from without, only attest its strength. They were signs of the seriousness with which converts and dissenters took their salvation, ready to stake their souls on points of doctrine which a latter, less biblical generation could treat with indifference. This is from William Mulder and Russell Mortensen, Mortensen, Among the Mormons. It says 1, the city of saints. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God, and the Lord hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself above all the nations that are upon the earth. That's from Deuteronomy 14:2. And it shall come to pass that I, the Lord God, will send one mighty and strong, holding the scepter of power in his hand, clothed with light for a covering, whose mouth shall utter words, eternal words, while his bowels shall be a fountain of truth to set in order the house of God. That's from the Doctrine and Covenants, section 85, revealed to Joseph Smith on November 27th, 1832. Balanced atop the highest spire of the Salt Lake Temple, gleaming in the Utah sun, a statue of the angel Moroni stands watch over downtown Salt Lake City with his golden trumpet raised. This massive granite edifice is the spiritual and temporal nexus of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS, which represents itself as the world's only true religion. Temple Square is to Mormons what the Vatican is to Catholics, or Kaaba in Mecca is to Muslims. And last count, there were more than 11 million saints the world over. And Mormonism is the fastest growing faith in the Western Hemisphere. That still surprises me. I didn't know that. At present, in the United States, there are more Mormons than Presbyterians or Episcopalians. On the planet as a whole, there are now more Mormons than Jews. Mormonism is considered in some sober academic circles to be well on its way to becoming a major world religion, the first such faith to emerge since Islam. Next door to the temple, the 325 voices of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir swell to fill the tabernacle's vast interior with the robust, haunting chords of Battle Hymn of the Republic. The ensemble's trademark song, Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory of the Coming of the Lord. To much of the world, this choir and its impeccably rendered harmonies are emblematic of the Mormons as a people, chaste, optimistic, outgoing, dutiful. When Dan Lafferty quotes Mormon scripture to justify murder, the juxtaposition is so incongruous as to seem surreal. The affairs of Mormondom are directed by a charade of elderly white males in dark suits. I'm sorry, it's not charade. Cadre, Cadre. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. The affairs of Mormondom are directed by a cadre of elderly white males in dark suits who carry out their holy duties from a 26-story office tower besides Temple Square. There's a point here, and I'm going to read it, a footnote at the bottom. It says, control of the LDS Church resides in the hands of 15 men. At the top of the hierarchy pyramid is the president, prophet, seer, and revelator, who is believed to be God's direct mouthpiece on earth. The LDS president appoints 2 trusted apostles to serve as his first counselor and second counselor. Collectively, These three men function as the first presidency. Immediately below the first presidency is the quorum of the 12 apostles, and together, these 15 men, they are always men because women are excluded from positions of authority in the Mormon church, hold sway over the institution and its membership with absolute power. I just feel like, for me, I don't want to be a part of a group that excludes me. Just my thoughts. At the time, all 15 men serve for life. At the time of the president's death, the quorum of 12 appoints as new president the apostle from their ranks who has served the longest, hence the exceedingly advanced age of most of Mormon presidents. Back to the book. To a man, the LDS leadership adamantly insists that Lafferty should under no circumstances be considered a Mormon. The faith that moved Lafferty to slay his niece and sister-in-law is a brand of religion known as Mormon fundamentalism. LDS church authorities bristle visibly when Mormons and Mormon fundamentalists are even mentioned in the same breath. As Gordon B. Hinckley, the then 88-year-old LDS president and prophet, emphasized during a 1998 television interview on Larry King Live, they have no connection with us, whatever. They don't belong to the church. They are actually no Mormon fundamentalist. Nevertheless, Mormons and those who call themselves Mormon fundamentalists, or FLDS, believe in the same holy text and the same sacred history. Both believe that Joseph Smith, who founded Mormonism in 1830, played a vital role in God's plan for mankind. Both LDS and FLDS consider him to be a prophet, comparable in stature to Moses and Isaiah. Mormons and Mormon fundamentalists are each convinced that God regards them and them alone as his favored children. That alone, I don't agree with, but whatever. A peculiar treasure unto me above all people. But if both proudly refer to themselves as the Lord's chosen, they diverge on one especially inflammatory point of religious doctrine. Unlike their present-day Mormon compatriots, Mormon fundamentalists passionately believe that saints have a divine obligation to take multiple wives. Followers of the FLDS faith engage in polygamy. They explain it as a matter of religious duty. There are more than 30,000 FLDS polygamists living in Canada, Mexico, and throughout the American West. Some experts estimate there may be as many as 100,000, even though this larger number amounts to less than 1% of the membership in the LDS church worldwide. But all the same, leaders of the mainstream church are extremely discomforted by these legions of polygamous brethren. Mormon authorities treat the fundamentalists as they would a crazy uncle. They try to keep the plagues hidden in the attic, safely out of sight. But the fundamentalists always seem to be sneaking out to appear in public and at inopportune moments to create unsavory scenes, embarrassing the entire LDS clan. The LDS church happens to be exceedingly prickly about its short, uncommonly rich history, and no aspect of that history makes the church more defensive than plural marriage. The LDS leadership has worked very hard to persuade both the modern church members and the American public that polygamy was a quaint, long abandoned idiosyncrasy practiced by a mere handful of 19th century Mormons. The religious literature handed out by the earnest young missionaries in Temple Square makes no mention of the fact that Joseph Smith, still the religion's focal personage, married at least 33 women at probably as many as 48. I think that alone, when you're taking out bits of doctrine purposely to have things go whatever way you deem them to go. I think that alone speaks volumes to how people are sometimes flawed, and why myself often finds myself feeling like the main thing is to lead from love because of things like this. Man has a way of putting their hands in things and twisting it to the way that they want it to be. And it just has me looking at you like, I don't know. But let me continue. Nor does it mention that the youngest of the wives was just 14 years old when Joseph explained to her that God had commanded that she marry him or face eternal damnation. That's the part I have a problem with. That a lot of cases, that because they work on these people at such a young age, that they really, really put them in this cult-like area where here you are telling a little girl, like, marry me, or if you don't, you're probably gonna die. Like, come on. Polygamy was in fact one of the most sacred credos of Joseph's church, a tenet important enough to be set for the ages as section 113 of the Doctrine and Covenants, one of Mormonism's primary spiritual texts. The revered prophet describes plural marriage as part of the most holy and important doctrine ever revealed to man on earth, and taught that a man needed at least 3 wives to attain the fullness of exaltation in the afterlife. He warned that God had implicitly commanded that all those who have this law revealed unto them must obey the same. Okay, so if I've never had that law revealed, it don't apply? Like, what do we mean here? And if ye abide not that covenant, then ye are damned, for no one can reject this covenant and be permitted to enter into my glory. Joseph was murdered in Illinois by a mob of Mormon haters in 1844. Brigham Young assumed leadership of the church and led the saints to the barren wilds of the Great Basin, where, in short order, they established a remarkable empire and embraced the covenant of spiritual wifery. This both titillated and shocked the sensibilities of the Victorian era Americans, who tended to regard polygamy as a brutish practice on par with slavery. What? It has a footnote. It's likely that in the 19th century, polygamy was actually abhorrent to many more Americans than slavery was. The latter, after all, had a multitude of proponents in numerous states, whereas it was hard to find many advocates for the former outside Utah territory. In 1856, recognizing the strength of the anti-polygamy vote, Republican candidate John C. Fremont ran for president on a platform that pledged to prohibit in the territories those twin relics of barbarism, polygamy, and slavery. Fremont lost the election, but a year later, the man who did win, President James Buchanan, or I'm not saying that right, Buchanan, Buchanan, sent the U.S. Army to invade Utah, dismantle Brigham Young's theocracy, and eradicate polygamy. The so-called Utah War, however, neither removed Brigham from power nor ended the doctrine of plural marriage, to the annoyance and bafflement of a whole series of American presidents. An escalating sequence of judicial and legislative challenges to polygamy ensued, culminating in the Edmunds-Tucker Act of 1887, which disincorporated the LDS Church and forfeited to the federal government all church property worth more than $50,000. With their feet held fast to the fire, the saints ultimately had no choice but to renounce polygamy. But even as LDS leaders publicly claimed in 1890 to have relinquished the practice, they quietly dispatched bands of Mormons to establish polygamous colonies in Mexico and Canada, and some of the highest-ranking LDS authorities secretly continued to take multiple wives and perform plural marriages well into the 20th century. Although LDS leaders were initially loath to abandon plural marriage, eventually they adopted a more pragmatic approach to American politics, emphatically rejected the practice, and actually began urging government agencies to prosecute polygamists. It was this single change in ecclesiastical policy, more than anything else, that transformed the LDS Church into its astonishingly successful present day iteration. Having jettisoned polygamy, Mormons gradually ceased to be regarded as a crackpot sect. The LDS Church acquired the trappings of a conventional faith so successfully that it is now widely considered to be the quintessential American religion. Mormon fundamentalists, however, believe that acceptance into the American mainstream came at way too high of a price. They contend that the Mormon leaders made an unforgivable compromise by capitulating to the U.S. government on polygamy over a century ago. They insist that the church sold them out, that the LDS leadership abandoned one of the religion's most crucial theological tenets for the sake of political expediency. These present-day polygamists therefore consider themselves to be the keepers of the flame, the only true and righteous Mormons. In forsaking Section 132, the sacred principle of plural marriage, the LDS Church has gone badly astray, they warn. Fundamentalist prophets bellow from their pulpits that modern-day church has become the wickedest whore of all the earth. Well, my goodness, not a whore. Mormon fundamentalists probably cite Section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants more than any other piece of LDS scripture. Their second most popular citation is likely Section 85, in which it was revealed to Joseph that I, the Lord God, will send one mighty and strong to set in order the house of God. Many fundamentalists are convinced that the one mighty and strong is already here among them, holding the scepter of power in his hand, and that very soon now he will lead the Mormon church back onto the right path and restore Joseph's most holy and important doctrine. Interesting. 2. Short Creek. Extreme and bizarre religious ideas are so commonplace in American history that it is difficult to speak of them as fringe at all. To speak of a fringe implies a mainstream, but in terms of numbers, perhaps the largest component of the religious spectrum in contemporary American remains what has been since colonial times: a fundamentalist evangelicalism with powerful millenarian strands. Millenarian? Millenarian strands. The doomsday theme has never been far from the center of American religious thought. The nation has always had believers who responded to this threat by a determination to flee from the wrath to come, to separate themselves from the city of destruction, even if that meant putting themselves at odds with the law and with their communities or families. We can, throughout American history, find select and separatist groups who look to a prophetic individual claiming divine revelation in a setting that repudiated conventional assumptions about property, family life, and sexuality. They were marginal groups, peculiar people, people set apart from the world, the Shakers, the communes of Oneida and Amana, the followers of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. This is from Philip Jenkins, Mystics and Messiahs. Snaking diagonally across the top of Arizona, the Grand Canyon is stupendous. 277-mile rent in the planet's hide that functions as a formidable nature barrier, effectively cutting off the northwestern corner from the rest of the state. This isolated wedge of back county, almost as big as New Jersey, yet traversed by a single paved highway, is known as the Arizona Strip. And it has one of the lowest population densities in the 48 states. There is, however, one relatively large municipality here. Colorado City, home to some 9,000 souls, is more than 5 times as populous as any other town in the district. Motorists driving west on Highway 389 across the parched barrens of the Uinkaret Plateau are apt to be surprised when 28 miles of Pass Fredonian, population 1,036, the second largest town on the strip, Colorado City, suddenly materialized in the middle of nowhere. A sprawl of small businesses and unusually large homes squatting beneath a towering... What? Alexa, how do you pronounce ESCARPMENT?
The letters in these words are pronounced as follows: E as in egg, S as in sit, C as in cat, A as in apple, R as in red, P as in pit, M as in mat, E as in egg, N as in nest, T as in tuba. By the way, you have a new notification. Do you want to hear it?
She did all that and didn't tell me how to pronounce the word. Escarpment of Vermilion sandstone called Canaan Mountain, Canaan Mountain. All but a handful of the town's residents are Mormon fundamentalists. They live in this patch of desert in the hope of being left alone to follow the sacred principle of plural marriage without interference from government authorities or the LDS Church. Straddling the Utah-Arizona border, Colorado City is home to at least 3 Mormon fundamentalist sects, including the world's largest, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more commonly known as the United Effort Plan, or the UEP. It requires its members to live in strict ordinance with the commandments of a frail 92-year-old tax accountant turned prophet named Rulon T. Jeffs, Uncle Rulon, as he is known to his followers, traces his divinely ordained leadership in an unbroken chain that leads directly back to Joseph Smith himself. Although his feeble bearing would seem to make him poorly cast for the role, the residents of Colorado City believe that Uncle Rulon is the one mighty and strong whose coming was prophesied by Joseph in 1832. A lot of people here are convinced Uncle Rulon is going to live forever. Well, we know that ain't true. Says Deloy Bateman, a 48-year-old science teacher at Colorado City High School. Not only was Deloy born and raised in this faith, but his forebears were some of the religion's most illustrious figures. His great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather were among the 13 founding members of the Mormon Fundamentalist Church, and his adopted grandfather, Leroy Johnson, was the prophet who immediately preceded Uncle Rulon as leader of Colorado City. At the moment, Deloy is driving his third-hand Chevy van on a dirt road on the outskirts of town. One of his 2 wives and 8 of his 17 children are riding in the back. 2 wives? 2 wives, and he has 17 children. Those women, understand, I come from a large family. My parents got a lot of siblings, and their parents have even more. It's just the thought of 2 women being expected to produce all these children. That's the part. Suddenly, he hits the brakes, and the van lurches to a stop on the shoulder. Now, there's an interesting sight. Deloy declares, sizing up the wreckage of a television satellite dish behind some sagebrush off the side of the road. Looks like somebody had to get rid of their television, hauled it out of town, and dumped it. Members of the religion, he explains, are forbidden to watch television or read magazines or newspapers. The temptations of the outside world loom large. However, and some members of the faith inevitably succumb. I think that one of the reasons why they tell them not to have these televisions and read things is because knowledge is power and they want to keep them bound. And unfortunately, these people don't even realize that that's the real reason why, because we're trying to prevent you from knowing all the stuff that we got going on. Let's continue. As soon as you ban something, Deloy observes, you make it incredibly attractive. People will sneak it into St. George or Cedar City and buy themselves a dish, put it up where it can't be easily seen, and secretly watch TV during every free moment. Then one Sunday, Uncle Rulon will give one of his sermons about the evils of television. He'll announce that he knows exactly who has one and warn everyone who does is putting their eternal souls in serious jeopardy. Every time he does that, a bunch of satellite dishes immediately get dumped in the desert, like this one here. For 2 or 3 years afterward, there won't be any televisions in town. But then, gradually, the dishes start secretly going up again until the next crackdown. People try to do the right thing, but they're only human. As the TV prohibition suggests, life in Colorado City under Rulon Jeffs bears more than a passing resemblance to life in Kabul under the Taliban. Uncle Rulon's word carries weight of law. The mayor and every other city employee answers to him. That's crazy to me. The fact that the mayor answers to him and other city employees show you why they've been able to get away with the things that we read about in our last book. As do the entire police force and the superintendent of public schools. The superintendent of public schools answers to Rulon. Even animals are subjected to his whim. 2 years ago, a Rottweiler killed a child in town. An edict went out that dogs would no longer be allowed within the city limits. A posse of young men was dispatched to round up all the canines, after which the unsuspecting pets were taken into a dry wash and shot. Uncle Rulon has married an estimated 75 women with whom he has fathered at least 65 children. Now, that's not a whole bunch when you talk about 75 women. Yeah, but we'll see what happens. Several of his wives were given to him in marriage when they were 14 or 15 and he was in his 80s. That is disgusting. His sermons frequently stress the need for total submission. I want to tell you that the greatest freedom you can enjoy in this life is obedience, he preached. Perfect obedience produces perfect faith. Like most FLDS prophets, his teachings rely heavily on fiery screeds penned in the 19th century by Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Uncle Rulon likes to remind his followers of Brigham's warning that for those who commit such unspeakable sins as homosexuality or having sexual intercourse with a member of the African race, the penalty under the law of God is death on the spot. This will always be so. How dare you? How dare you want to sleep with somebody of the African American race? It may do something to you if you do so. What? That sounds insane to me. How dare you have a desire to sleep with someone who looks like you? How dare you want to be a homosexual? I just like, when I hear stuff like this, in my opinion, ignorance is real, and it's about so much more than you judging what somebody else is deciding to do. Let me continue. Polygamy is illegal in both Utah and Arizona. To avoid prosecution, typically men in Colorado City will legally marry only the first of their wives. Subsequent wives, although spiritually married to their husband by Uncle Rulon, thus remain single mothers in the eyes of the state. This has added the benefit of allowing the enormous families in town to qualify for welfare and other forms of public assistance. In my opinion, if you're so against things of this world, then you should not be able to take from this world. If you're so against these organizations, why does it not matter when it comes to you wanting to rob them and abuse funds for people who actually may need them, rather than y'all continue to create all these lives and not be able to take care of them? And then take taxpayers' dollars, who you're calling Gentiles and saying negative things about, and using it in order to help your family survive. It's just the hypocrisy of it all. Despite the fact that Uncle Rulon and his followers regard the governments of Arizona, Utah, and the United States, this part, as satanic forces out to destroy the UEP, their polygamous community receives more than $6 million a year in public funds. More than $4 million of government money flows each year into the Colorado City Public School District, which, according to the Phoenix News-Times, is operated primarily for the financial benefit of the FLDS Church and for personal enrichment of the FLDS school district leaders. Reporter John Dougherty determined that school administrators have plundered the district's treasury by running up thousands of dollars in personal expenses on district credit cards, purchasing expensive vehicles for their personal use, and engaging in extensive travel. The spending spree culminated in December 2002. When the district purchased a $220,000 airplane to facilitate trips by district personnel to cities across Arizona. Colorado City has received $1.9 million from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to pave its streets, improve the fire department, and upgrade the water system. Immediately south of the city limits, the federal government built a $2.8 million airport that serves almost no one beyond the fundamentalist community. In 2002, 78% of the town's residents living on the Arizona side of the state received food stamps. Do y'all hear that? 78%? That is a crazy number. Currently, the residents of Colorado City receive $8 in government services for every dollar they pay in taxes by comparison. Residents in the rest of Mohave County, Arizona, Mohave, receive just over $1 in services per tax dollars paid. Uncle Rulon justifies all that assistance from the wicked government by explaining that really the money is coming from the Lord. It's coming from the people. It ain't coming from the Lord. The people are giving that money. But y'all are going to find a way to justify robbing people any way that you can. Ugh. We're taught, according to Deloy, that it's the Lord's way of manipulating the system to take care of his chosen people. Whatever. Your way of manipulating the system. Fundamentalists call defrauding the government bleeding the beast and regard it as a virtuous act. Oh, so you should just bleed whoever you can, according to them. This is crazy. Uncle Rulon and his followers believe that the earth is 7,000 years old and that men have never walked on the moon. Film clips showing Apollo astronauts on the lunar surface are part of the elaborate hoax foisted on the world by the American government, they say. I wonder how they feel about AI, because AI really can change things now and make things seem what they are. So I wonder how they feel about that, if this is how they feel about actual footage that we know, because I believe that they really were on the moon and all these other things. Come on now. But they don't believe in that, and they think it's just, a hoax. Like, come on. In addition to the edict against watching television or reading newspapers, residents of Colorado City are forbidden to have any contact with people outside the UEP, including family members who have left the religion. Deloy, as it happens, is one such apostate. He and his immense family live in the correspondingly immense house. At 16,000 square feet, it is more than 5 times as large as a typical 3-bedroom home, which he built with his own hands in the middle of the town. His brother David lives in a similarly large home just a few yards away, on the other side of the 6-foot fence. My brother over the fence there, says Deloy, gesturing with his chin. Him and I are just as close as any 2 people on the planet. Our father was disabled when we were small children, so David and I raised each other. But now he isn't allowed to talk to me because I'm no longer in the religion. So you live right next to one another, and because he's no longer a part of the religion, you can't talk to your sibling who you live right next to. And you don't think that there's something odd that a religion would demand this of you? I don't know. We're supposed to love. How is me shunning you loving you? If his wife catches him having a conversation with me, she'll take all the children and Uncle Rulon will marry her to some other man within hours. And David will be what the locals call a eunuch, a man who is allowed to remain in the religion, but who has a family taken away. I don't think I said that word right. It's EUNUCH. I want to ask Alexa, but Alexa, hold on. Let me pause this and see what Alexa says. I was right. It is a eunuch. I didn't know that's how it was spelled. Okay. The locals call it a eunuch, a man who is allowed to remain in the religion, but who has had his family taken away from him, like what was supposed to happen to me when I left the work. Deloy used to be a respected member of the religion. He has never touched a drop of alcohol or coffee, never smoked a cigarette, never uttered a profane word. He was unwavering in his obedience and made a point to keep his head down. Then in 1996, relatives of his second wife began spreading rumors about him. Somebody shared these rumors with the prophet, and the upshot, he laments, was that Uncle Rulon called me into his office and made all kinds of accusations against me. So even though these things weren't true, even though he was a devout man, just because people made up rumors, now you call him in the office, you believe these rumors that you heard, and then you take his family away from him, not thinking that maybe those people did it on purpose because maybe they wanted somebody from his family. Like, you just never know. The prophet, he says, was extremely angry. So angry, he was actually vibrating and spittle was flying out of his mouth as he spoke. The normal procedure when the prophet confronts you like that is to basically say, I'm sorry, I've done this to displease thee. What would thou have me do? But this time I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just couldn't say it. There was simply no truth in what he had accused me of doing. So I leaned over until my face was within inches of his, and then said real calmly in a soft voice, I said, Uncle Rulon, everything you have said is a lie, an absolute lie. And he sat back in his chair in total shock. This was not something anyone had ever done. Upon arriving home, He considered the enormity of what had just occurred. Uncle Roy spoke to God on a continual basis. All his wisdom and knowledge supposedly came straight from the Lord. But in a matter of moments, it had become apparent to me that this man wasn't really communicating with God, or he would have known that what he accused me of was a lie. Right then and there, I decided to leave the work, even though I knew it would mean the end of my life as I knew it. When he failed to show up for the weekly priesthood meeting on the following Sunday, within 24 hours, Uncle Rulon dispatched someone to his house to take away his wives and children. That is insane. Because he called him out, because he didn't believe what he was saying, because he knew the man was lying, and because he decides I'm not going to be a part of something that is accusing me of something that I know I didn't do, which means you don't really have, you're not really God's mouthpiece. You're going to take my wives and my kids. So it's like either way, he was doomed. According to UEP dogma, wives do not belong to their husbands. What do you mean belong? Okay, now I'm getting hot. Wives do not belong to their husbands, nor do children belong to their parents. All are property of the priesthood and may be claimed at any time. Excuse me? Do I look like a piece of baggage that you could just pick up whenever you want to pick up? Uncle Rulon decreed that his wives and kids were to be given to another, worthier man immediately. But both of Deloy's wives declined to leave him. Good job. Uncle Rulon was flabbergasted. The priesthood means far more than family or anything else, explains Deloy. For my wives to defy Uncle Rulon and stick with me even though I was going straight to hell, that was unheard of. Deloy's spouses and all his children, except the 3 older, thus became apostates too. In Colorado City, the faithful are taught that apostates are more wicked than Gentiles or even mainline Mormons. Footnote. In the unique lexicon shared by Mormons and Mormon fundamentalists, all those who have never subscribed to the teachings of Joseph Smith are known as Gentiles. Among them are Mormons, even Jews are referred to as Gentile. Those who were once devout but have left the faith are apostates. Non-practicing saints are Jack Mormons. In the sermon preached in July 16, 2000, Bishop Warren Jeffs, Uncle Rulon's son and heir apparent, emphasized that an apostate is the most dark person on earth. So somebody who leaves this faith is darker than the man, according to Warren, that we just learned about, the vile things that he was doing to not just not just children, but to his nieces and nephews and cousins and siblings. So he's not bad, but because you want to leave this religion, you're the darkest of the darkest. Okay, whatever you say, Warren. Okay. Apostates, he exclaimed, have turned traitor on the priesthood and their own existence, and they are led about by their master Lucifer. Apostates are literally tools of the devil. When Deloy apostatized, relatives who remained in the religion were forbidden to speak to him, his wives, or his apostate children ever again. Although he had built and paid for his home, the UEP owns all the land within the city limits, including the lot on which his home was built. Uncle Rulon and the UEP have filed a legal action to take possession of his house and are currently trying to evict him from Colorado City. So when we hear about how one of the things that Brent Jeffs and others tried to do when they were suing was to make sure that those people could not be removed from their homes. This is what he's talking about, because here this man built this house by himself and you're trying to kick him out just because you made sure that you own the land. It's a jacked up situation that's designed to keep them bound, and if they leave, they have nothing. It's no accident that Colorado City is a long way from anywhere. Short Creek as a town was then known, was settled in the 1920s by half a dozen fundamentalist families wanting to live where they would be free to follow Joseph Smith's most holy principle without outside interference. The UEP failed to appreciate the extent to which polygamy has periodically stirred public passions. However, By the early 1950s, the population of Short Creek had grown to more than 400. So, this alarmed government officials and the LDS leadership in Salt Lake City that Arizona's governor, Howard Pyle, with the church encouragement and financial backing, concocted an elaborate plan to raid the town and stamp out polygamy. On July 26, 1953, 8 months before Deloy Bateman was born, some 100 state police officers, 40 county deputies, and dozens of troops from the Arizona National Guard drove into Short Creek in the pre-dawn darkness and arrested 122 polygamous men and women, including Deloy's father. The 263 children from these families were declared wards of the state, bused for hundreds of miles to Kingman, Arizona, and placed in foster care. In a carefully worded multi-page statement defending the raid, Governor Pyle called it a momentous police action against insurrection within Arizona's own borders. The leaders of this mass violation of so many of our laws have boasted directly to Mohave County officials that their operations have grown so great that the state of Arizona was powerless to interfere. They have been shielded, as you know, by the geographic circumstances of Arizona's northmost territory, the region beyond the Grand Canyon that is best known as the Strip. This is a land of high plateaus, dense forests, great breaks, and gorges, rolling lands and intense color, a land squeezed between the even higher plateaus of Utah and the Grand Canyon of Arizona. The community of Short Creek is 400 miles by the shortest road from the Mohave County to the seat of Kingman. Massive cliffs rearing north of Short Creek's little central street provide a natural rock barrier to the north, to the east and west, where there are sweeping expanses of dry and almost barren plateaus before the forests begin. To the south, there is the Grand Canyon. It is the most isolated of all Arizona communities that this foulest of conspiracies has flourished and expanded in a terrifying geometric progression. Here has been a community entirely dedicated to the warped philosophy that a small handful of greedy and litigious men should have the right and power to control the destiny of every human soul in the community. Here is a community, many of women, sadly right along with the men, unalterably dedicated to the wicked theory that every maturing girl child should be forced into the bondage of multiple wifehood with men of all ages for the sole purposes of producing more children to be reared to become more cattle of this totally lawless enterprise. Woo! That is a word. One day after the raid, the Desert News, a daily newspaper owned by the LDS Church, had an editorial in support of the action. Utah and Arizona owe a debt of gratitude to Arizona's Howard Pyle. We hope the unfortunate activities at Short Creek will be cleaned up once and for all. The raid made national headlines. It was even reported on the front page of the New York Times, with the same prominence given a story announcing the ending of the Korean War. But to the dismay of the LDS leadership, most of the press presented the polygamists in a favorable light. Photos of crying children being torn from their mothers' arms generated sympathy throughout the nation for the fundamentalists who protested that they were upstanding, law-abiding Mormons simply trying to exercise their constitutionally protected freedoms. The raid was widely perceived as a religious persecution by overly zealous government agencies, and it sparked a great outcry in support of the polygamists. The Arizona Republic, for example, criticized the action of a misuse of public funds in 1954. Governor Pyle was voted out of office thanks largely to the raid and the egg it left on his face. The arrest and subsequent trials cost taxpayers $600,000, yet by 1956, all the polygamists who had been arrested were out of jail and reunited with their families in Short Creek. Members of the UEP unapologetically resumed living the principle as taught by Joseph Smith, and the population of the town continued to more than double each decade, a consequence of the community's giant families and astronomical birth rate. Paradoxically, the Short Creek raid proved to be a huge boon to the FLDS church thanks to the backlash that followed the raid. For most of the next half century, fundamentalists were able to practice polygamy throughout the Intermountain West with little state interference until May 1998, when a battered and bruised teenage girl named Mary Ann Kingston dialed 911 from a payphone at a truck stop in northern Utah. Mary Ann had an unsettling story to report. Immediately after her 16th birthday, the girl's father, a businessman named John Daniel Kingston, had pulled her out of high school and forced her to become the 15th wife of his brother. Oh my goodness, David Kingston. Mary Ann's 32-year-old uncle. John Daniel, David Ortello, and Mary Ann are among 1,200 members of the so-called Kingston Clan, a particularly secretive Mormon fundamentalist sect based in Salt Lake County, officially known as the Latter-day Church of Christ, currently led by a lawyer named Paul Kingston, who is married to at least 25 women and has fathered some 200 offspring. The Kingstons own numerous businesses in at least 5 western states, a shadowy network of corporations and limited partnerships worth at least $150 million. If I can remember correctly, they have a bank and everything. Correct me if I'm wrong down below, because I've seen some stories about them in watching like Escaping Polygamy. Despite the clan's giant wealth, many of the Kingston wives and children, yes, they do, live in poverty and receive welfare. All but the most privileged members of the sect are required to work as many as 60 hours per week for a near minimum wage at one of the Kingston businesses. Instead of receiving paychecks, clan members have their wages deposited into a Kingston bank account, and receive scrip that allows them to make purchases at Kingston-owned stores. Rents, debts, and obligatory 10% tithe are deducted from each member's account. According to an article by Jennifer and Suzanne Snyder in the Salt Lake City Tribune, the Kingston leadership preaches a gospel of destruction, believes no member will reach heaven unless a daughter is married to a clan leader, and seeks to control members' lives to the extent of telling them how to rinse milk cartons and conserve shampoo. Even more than in other fundamentalist Mormon groups, incest is a common practice among the Kingstons. Clan leaders promote to purify the Kingston bloodline, and the birth defects are rampant as a consequence. Genealogical researcher Linda Walker says that the Kingston women have reported giving birth to blobs of protoplasm and having 8 or 9 pregnancies without ever giving birth to a living infant. The leaders of the clan, of course, blame this on the women, characterizing it as punishment for their sinful behavior. That is so jacked up. That is so dangerous. It's bad enough that you're assaulting these women. Then on top of it, you're making them feel badly for something that is beyond their control because you disgusting people decide that you should have sex with your own family. And you wonder why there's abnormalities when you're doing things that aren't meant to be done. Ugh. After being married against her will to her uncle, David Ortel Kingston, at the age of 16, Mary Ann Kingston tried to run away twice, but was caught on each occasion. Following the second escape, she sought refuge with her mother, who promptly turned the girl over to her father, John Daniel Kingston. John Daniel then drove Mary Ann to an isolated ranch near the Utah-Idaho border, which the Kingstons used as a re-education camp for wayward wives and disobedient children. He took the girl into a barn, pulled off his belt and used it to whip her savagely across the buttocks, thighs, and lower back, inflicting hideous injuries. Marianne later told a judge that before the beating began, her father warned her he was going to give me 10 licks for every wrongdoing. After brutalizing his daughter, yes, because that's what it was, John Daniel departed, at which point Marianne fled from the ranch and limped 5 miles along a dirt road until she reached a gas station where she called the police. Both John Daniel and David Ortel Kingston were arrested and subsequently convicted in highly publicized trials. John Daniel was found guilty of child abuse and locked up in the county jail for 28 weeks. That's not enough. David Ortel was sentenced to 10 years in the Utah State Prison for incest and unlawful sexual conduct, but was released for good behavior after serving just 4 years. I'm so tired of them allowing for these people to commit these types of crimes and giving them a slap on the wrist. If you want to do nasty things, you should get life. My opinion. Tell me yours. In August 2003, not satisfied that justice had been served, Marianne Kingston filed a civil suit seeking more than $110 million in damages from 242 members of the Kingston clan for the harm they have caused. Following the Kingston convictions in 1999, Mormon fundamentalists all over the West immediately found themselves uncomfortably back in the public eye. The residents of Colorado City were among the fundamentalists made edgy by the heightened attention, and they became considerably more nervous in April 2000 when another Utah polygamist, Thomas Arthur Green, was charged with bigamy and first-degree felony rape of a child. The Kingston's trial, although front page news in Utah, didn't make a big splash elsewhere. The state's prosecution of Green turned into a public spectacle, largely of Green's own creation, and his plural marriages were featured in every major media outlet from Seattle to Miami. So y'all rather make this about the plural marriage aspect of it than the vile acts that are done to children and women who don't desire to do these things. 54-year-old Tom Green is a fat, bearded man with a receding hairline, 32 children, and 5 wives. He has married at least 10 different women all told, but the other 5 have left him. Good for them. The oldest of his current wives is 22 years younger than he is. The youngest is 29 years younger. Home for the gigantic Green family has long been a collection of decrepit trailers plunked down on 10 acres of desert in Wab, Juab County's desolate Snake Valley Way out toward the Nevada line, 100 miles from the nearest paved road. Green has modestly christened this little kingdom as Green Haven. I watch Big Love, and all I'm thinking about is the different characters in Big Love, and I'm seeing that they got it from this. Unlike most polygamists, who consequently avoid outside scrutiny, Green has an insatiable thirst for publicity. He and his wives have opened their lives to numerous print journalists and have eagerly appeared on such television shows as Judge Judy, Jerry Springer, Queen Latifah, Sally Jessy Raphael, and Dateline NBC. They decided to seek this media attention. Green explained in a public statement after he woke up one morning and heard a voice say to me, "Don't hide your light under a bushel, but let your light so shine before men so that they will see your good words and glorify your Father in heaven." I told my wives what I had heard and that I understood from it that God wanted us to be an example that plural marriage can work. We are not ashamed of our beliefs, and we are certainly not ashamed of our family. We just want people to realize that polygamists are not a threat. Yeah, y'all are, especially when you keep taking money and funds and R-ing girls and doing all the things that y'all are doing. Y'all are very much so a threat. We're not fanatics. We are not criminals. Yes, you are. Unfortunately, at least the ones that we're reading about are. Let me be clear. Unfortunately for Tom Green, the attorney, David O. Leverett, the younger brother of Utah Governor Mike Leavitt, happened to turn on his television one night in 1999 to see Green boasting of his young wives on Dateline NBC. Although he had long known about Green's polygamous colony out in the West Desert, until he saw Green holding forth in prime time, he had no intention of prosecuting him. As a child, Leavitt, Leavitt, had friends who were the offspring of polygamists, and his own great-grandfather had married a plural of wives. In 1993, when he was fresh out of law school and working as a public defender, he even defended a polygamist and won by arguing that the religious freedom guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution overruled state laws criminalizing plural marriage. But then he saw Green bragging on national television that he had married all of his current wives when they were mere girls. One of them was only 13 when he, at age 37, got her pregnant. Let that sit. A 13-year-old getting pregnant by a 37-year-old. And you wonder why we say it's criminal what's being done. According to the Utah statute, when an adult male has sex with a 13-year-old child, a first-degree felony has been committed. Tom Green, at first blush, appeared to be someone that no one should bother. Leavitt explained to reporter Pauline of the Associated Press in November 2000, but this is a man who has taken 13 and 14-year-old children, deprived them of any education, married them, impregnated them, required the state to pay the bill, and has raped a 13-year-old girl. 5 months after the Dateline show aired, Leavitt filed charges against Green, who was supporting his oversized family by drawing welfare checks. Investigators from the Utah Attorney General's office have documented that between 1989 and 1999, that's 10 years, Tom Green and his dependents received more than $647,000 in state federal assistance. Ridiculous. Including $203,000 in food stamps and nearly $300 in medical and dental expenses. These same investigators estimated that had they been granted complete access to pertinent government files as far back as 1985, when Green began his polygamous lifestyle, they would have been able to show that he received well over $1 million in welfare. Linda Coons Green, now 28, was 13 when she married Tom Green. She insists that he has done nothing wrong, that she is no victim. She says that she enjoys being a plural wife and points out that getting married to Green was her idea. Leavitt counters that Linda is simply a victim, yes, of what psychologists call Stockholm Syndrome, in which hostages sympathize with the latter defend their captors. The ability to choose is an ability that Linda Green never had, Leavitt argues. At the time Linda married Green, her mother, Beth Cook, was also married to Green. That's gross. Although Cook has since left him, 7 of the 10 women Green has married, and all of his current wives, were the children of his other wives when he married them. He has made a habit of marrying his stepdaughters, and we don't think that this is sick? All of whom were 16 or younger when he brought them into his matrimonial bed. Cook was raised in Short Creek, the product of a polygamous family in 1953. When she was 9 years old, she watched Moab County Sheriff's deputies arrest her father and 30 other men in Short Creek's raid. 3 years later, at the age of 12, Cook was married off to her stepfather, Warren Elmer Johnson, and brother of the prophet, Leroy Johnson. Cook became one of 7 women to marry Elmer. In 1984, after Elmer Johnson had died and the husband who succeeded him had departed, Cook and her 2 daughters were introduced to Green at a Sunday school meeting. I pay particular attention to him, Cook told freelance journalist Carolyn Campbell, because my friend said she had met Tom Green and he was the ugliest man she had ever met. Cook, who is 4 years older than Green, thought otherwise. She found him handsome as well as highly intelligent. She was impressed with the way he took charge of the meeting. He asked her about He asked her out on a date, during which he announced that he was going to marry her, a prophecy that was fulfilled in short order. The newlyweds' honeymoon in Bountiful, Canada, a colony of the UEP polygamists in southwestern British Columbia. By 1985, Cook couldn't help noticing that her 13-year-old daughter, Linda, was showing feelings towards Green. Get the F out of here. Get the F out of here with that. Linda liked to sit in her stepfather's lap. I am cringing. And would hang on him for the longest time. That doesn't mean she's showing feelings. That means that maybe she's looking at him as a father that she didn't have. Like, y'all got to stop with this. She talked to him about she talked about him constantly and eventually asked Cook if she could marry Green. Cook consented, and in January 1986, Linda married Tom Green in Los Molinos, Mexico, a polygamous outpost of the Baja Peninsula. I was happy for my daughter because she was happy, and it was what she wanted, she said afterward. I was happy to share her with a man I loved very dearly and thought was a very special person. I'm so happy that my mom isn't dumb, because this is dumb. No offense to people. It's silly. Let me say it's silly. Linda Green was pregnant with Green's child before her 14th birthday. Even though Beth Cook left Green, she defends her daughter's marriage to him. 15 years later, she said in a 2001 interview with journalist Campbell, "I feel that time has proven it was a good decision. They are prosecuting Tom based on a 19th century morals. Now, who cares who sleeps with who? They are all consenting adults." She wasn't an adult at the time. She was a child. "Right now, there are lesbians, homosexuals, and single people living together all the time. There are married people living with others who they are not married to." You're sick. David Levitt doesn't consider Green's plural marriages a matter of religious freedom or a harmless sexual relationship between consenting adults. He views Green as a pedophile, plain and simple. I agree. He preyed on little girls who from the cradle knew no other life but polygamy. Thank you. He told Holly Mullen, a reporter for Salt Lake Tribune in August 2002, he robbed them of their childhood. When I looked at his picture, I realized it was about 5 women, all of them given in marriage by their mothers, all of them raised by their fathers to marry as children. They are victims of pedos. I'm going to say pedos because I don't want to, YouTube. And they are victims of the state of Utah, which turned its back on polygamy for 60 years. Levitt's case proved convincing in court. In August 2001, Green was convicted of 4 counts of bigamy and 1 charge of criminal non-support of his family. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay $78,868 in restitution. He should have got more. A year later, Levitt put Green on trial again for the additional and considerably more serious charge of having sex with Linda when she was 13, a crime that could have put him in prison for life. This time around, however, Green got lucky. Although he was found guilty of first-degree felony child rape, the judge gave him the minimum sentence, 5 years to life, to be served concurrently with his previous 5-year sentence for bigamy. So the judge didn't feel like it was wrong? Okay, judge. The relatively soft punishment riled many Utahns. 2 days after Green was sentenced, an editorial in The Spectrum, the daily paper of St. George, Utah, an LDS stronghold less than 40 miles from Colorado City, opened. Here's the thing. If they had all the different people in their pockets, who's to say this judge wasn't? Taxpayers and mostly importantly children lost during Tuesday's sentence hearing for now infamous polygamist Tom Green. In some polygamous relationships, particularly those involving young girls, there's a bit of brainwashing that goes on both before and after the illegal marriages. Girls are led to believe that such a relationship is one way to salvation. Then they are typically taken as wives by men twice their ages. Without the context of spiritual marriage, there would be no debate that these are acts of pedophilia. A man committed what amounts to statutory rape of a 13-year-old girl and basically won't serve any time for it. That's true. David was also dismayed by Green's lenient sentence. People in the state of Utah, he proclaimed, simply do not understand and have not understood for 50 years the devastating effect that the practice of polygamy has on young girls in our society. But Levitt went on to say that a change in how polygamy was regarded by Utah had begun. The ball is rolling. Time will demonstrate that this society will understand that the practice of polygamy is abusive to children, is abusive to women, is abusive to society. Levitt prevailed against Green in court, and he won from the LDS Church and established editorial writers, plaudits from the LDS Church and established editorial writers. But like Arizona Governor Howard Powell, who was voted out of office for masterminding the Short Creek Raid of 1953, Levitt discovered that his anti-polygamy crusade was not popular with the people. In November 2002, the voters of Wab County, I don't think I'm saying that right, JUAB, responded to the conviction of Tom Green by giving the boot to the prosecutor, David Levitt. They fired him because he sought justice for these little girls. Insane! Ever since the conviction of the Kingstons, even before Tom Green was first charged with bigamy, Mormon fundamentalists have received support from the American Civil Liberties Union and gay rights activists in advancing their claims of religious persecution. It has been an especially curious and uncomfortable coalition. FLDS doctrine proclaims that sodomy and homosexuality are egregious crimes against God and nature, punishable by death. Yet gays and polygamists have joined forces to keep the government out of the bedrooms. This partnership is made even more egregious by the fact that on the other side of the issue, radical feminists have allied themselves with the anti-feminist LDS Church to lobby for aggressive prosecution of polygamists. As they have been forced out of the shadows into the probing glare of the news media, polygamists continue to insist that they are simply trying to live in accordance with their deeply held, constitutionally protected beliefs. What goes on in our homes here is nobody's business, asserts Sam Roundy, Colorado City's polygamist police chief. We're not infringing on anybody. Don't we have the right to practice our religion? Yeah, but you don't have the right when it comes to y'all messing with little girls. But polygamy is a crime in all 50 states as well as in Canada, and police officers are sworn to uphold the law. This point became problematic for Chief Roundy on February 6, 2002, when Ruth Stubbs, the third wife of one of his police officers, fled Colorado City with her 2 children and appeared on the evening news in Phoenix complaining. Woo, this is a long chapter. Give me a second. She had complained that she had been beaten by her husband, Rodney Holm, and that polygamy is intrinsically abusive. Ruth, 19 when she left home and visibly pregnant with her 3rd child, had been pulled out of school following the 6th grade. Immediately after her 16th birthday, she was summoned to a meeting with Uncle Rulon and his son, Warren Jeffs, who informed her that in 24 hours she would be marrying Officer Holm, a handsome man who was exactly twice as old as she was. Ruth had wanted to marry someone else, a boy much closer to her own age. When she balked at becoming his plural wife and asked for some time to consider her options, her older sister Susie Stubbs, one of the 2 women already married to the police officer, called Ruth an asshole for doing that to Rod. Susie leaned hard on Ruth to become his 3rd wife until Ruth finally caved in and married him. They told me who to marry, Ruth asserted after she escaped from Colorado City. I think women should have the right to say yes or no, to have the right to say what's going on in their lives. Not only had Holm broken the law by marrying 3 women, he had committed statutory rape, a felony in both Utah and Arizona, by having sexual intercourse with Ruth when she was 16. To date, the Colorado City Police Department has not disciplined Officer Holm. What? Who is acting like the aggrieved party in the dispute. Assisted by the UEP attorneys, Rodney Holm is presently trying to obtain legal custody of Ruth's children so they can be raised with the FLDS values in company of his other 18 kids. Oh my goodness. In October 2002, the Utah Attorney General's office charged Holm with felony bigamy and 2 counts of unlawful acts for his relationship with Ruth. The state's case among Rodney Holm is crippled, however, by a rather significant impediment. In November 2002, Ruth Stubbs disappeared after submitting a signed handwritten note to the court stating that she did not want him to go to jail. Oh boy. And refusing to testify against him. As an editorial in St. George Daily Spectrum noted, this turn in an already odd case shows how complicated it is to prosecute the members of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who engage in unlawful activities. Yeah, because here she is coming out and saying something and y'all are harassing her. On August 14th, 2003, after deliberating for less than 2 hours at a jury in St. George, Utah, they found Rodney Holm guilty of 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor and 1 count of bigamy, all of which are 3rd-degree felonies in Utah. He was sentenced to 1 year. 1 year. In Washington County's Purgatory Correctional Facility with work release privileges, meaning he will be confined to jail only during nighttime hours. So not only did he get 1 year, but he still gets to work. A week after he began serving his sentence, he was granted a 3-day weekend furlough to attend the birth of his 23rd child. Yeah, Utah, y'all got some explaining to do. The corruption is real. Not that this is the only place, but my God. Where was I? Okay, before she vanished, Ruth Stubbs was living in the Phoenix home of her aunt, Penny Peterson, who ran away from Colorado City herself at the age of 14 when the prophet commanded her to become the wife of a 48-year-old man. 16 years later, Peterson remains very bitter about the UEP's polygamous culture. Polygamists say they are being attacked because of their religion, she told Salt Lake City Tribune. But where in the Constitution does it say that it's okay to molest and impregnate young girls? The mayor of Colorado City, Dan Barlow, considers apostates like Penny Peterson to be both misinformed and motivated by revenge. Oh my goodness. And views the prosecution of Rodney Holm as government harassment of an unorthodox but honorable religious minority. This is crazy. To Barlow, the Holm case is disturbingly reminiscent of the 1953 raid on Short Creek. They're coming after us again, he complains, and they're even using the same language. But there is a documented pattern of sexual abuse in Colorado City that severely undermines Mayor Barlow's attempt to frame the issue as one of religious persecution. In April 2002, for instance, the mayor's own son and namesake, Dan Barlow Jr., was charged with repeatedly esting, y'all know what I'm saying, 5 of his daughters over a period of 10 years. He admitted that he viewed his daughters as his wives. But the town closed ranks around him, and his father, the mayor, went before the court and pleaded for leniency. In the end, 4 of the daughters refused to testify against him. He got off with a suspended sentence after agreeing to sign a statement that said, "I made a mistake. I want to make it right, so I'm sorry." Get the... Couldn't have been my child. Couldn't have been my child. No, ain't no way. I want to be a good person. I have raised a good family, been a good father. I love them all. A fatherly love. You're saying you love all your children in a fatherly way, and yet you're touching them. You're emming them. You're graping them. But we're calling this love. You can keep that type of love. Nobody who knows anything about this religion is surprised that Dan didn't go to jail, says Debmy Palmer, a former member of the Canadian branch of the religion. barely able to detain her disgust. Do you have any idea what kind of pressure those poor Barlow girls must have been under not to testify against their father, the mayor's son? I'm sure the prophet told them that if they had said one word, they were going to go straight to hell. When I was abused by prominent members of the religion, that's what I was told every time. Folks in Colorado City pay little heed to such blasphemous talk from the likes of Palmer. They're convinced that Satan, along with the nefarious Gentiles and apostates who've fallen under his influence, are wholly to blame for the town's problems. This is so sick. Satan has been jealous of God since day one. A young, bright-eyed, very devout member of the priesthood explains, after first looking nervously up and down at the dry bed of Short Creek, then looking up and down at the wash once more to make sure nobody is around him to see him talking to a Gentile writer. Satan wants to rule. He doesn't want God to rule. So he tricks weak people into apostatizing and then going over to the other side. Meanwhile, y'all are the evilest of the evil. I'm adding that. These so-called righteous people, his so-called favorites, are the real problem. This young man, along with most of the other residents of Colorado City, believes that in the very short order, the world will be thoroughly cleansed of Satan's minions, apostates, mainline Mormons, and Gentile writers alike, because the prophet has told him so many times in the past few years. In the late 1990s, as the new millennium approached, Uncle Rulon assured his followers that they would soon be lifted up to the celestial kingdom, while pestilence, hail, famine, and earthquake would sweep the wicked, i.e. everyone else, from the face of the earth. Fearing that single women would be left up behind to perish in the apocalypse because they had not yet been given the opportunity to live the principle, the prophet married off a spate of teenage girls to older, already married men. Ruth Stubbs was one such bride. When the year 2000 came and went without the arrival of Armageddon or anyone being lifted up, Uncle Rulon explained to his followers that they were to blame because they hadn't been sufficiently obedient. Contrite, the residents of Colorado City promised to live more righteously. Predicting the end of the world is a win-win situation for Uncle Rulon, apostate Deloy Bateman observes. You can always just blame it on the inequities or iniquities, as I like to say, of the people. If it doesn't happen, and then use that as a club to hold over their heads and control them in the future. And that is it. Y'all, that was a long one. I wasn't expecting it to be so long. I know some of you all like the longer chapters. My apologies for the length, but let me know how you felt about this chapter. I'm going to put a warning up there because we talked about some crazy stuff and everything was just a let go. Like, how do we feel about the fact that they get prosecuted, all this money is spent, and they get a slap on the wrist? Put that down below. Like the video as it helps the channel. Until next time.